I want to talk to you about AI, which I think is the biggest elephant in any room in higher education right now. Fortunately, we economists have a really good way of thinking about what happens with new technologies. With new technologies, we simply say that out with the old. Some kinds of work are just going to disappear, and if you're a horse and buggy driver, off you go. In with the new. New types of even more productive work are going to arise. Car drivers, mechanics, manufacturing workers, and so on. So, of course, we would want the same script to go exactly the same when it comes to our field, and so this applies just as much to generative AI. Out with the old ways of doing things, in with the new ways of doing things. What do I mean by out with the old? I think we've all learned or are learning that basically high stakes at-home assessment is dead. Unfortunately, the biggest lesson for me out of the pandemic was how to do at-home assessment, and then I had to kill it. So that's some existing types of work are going to disappear, preparing that sort of exam. In with the new, well, we can use AI to develop as new tools that we can use to do new things. And the task for today that I want us all to be engaged with is let's figure out what those new things are. And so you could think about you could think about the issues also as two frames here. You could think about AI as foe. Our students are going to cheat. We can't do high stakes exams. We can't have essays anymore. And it really restricts and constrains what we can do. And so fortunately we've got John Meir. John's going to talk about that straight after. So John's going to be the grumpy guy. And I'm going to be the sunny optimist who says, with new tools, we can do new things. Now, I want to acknowledge, actually, that John's right. But we can both be right here. And I gave a talk. Part of the reason I'm not reprising AI as foe today is I gave an online webinar several months ago where I talked about the challenges that it was presenting. And so if anyone's interested in following up on that webinar, the details are right there. But you're going to have Mia in just a moment. So how do we reinvent higher education and assessment for the AI era when every student has access to a perfect plagiarist, a near perfect plagiarist sitting on their laptops or in their phones? Adrian Wooldridge, who used to be the editor of The Economist, he had a suggestion. He said, well, we should go back and do what Oxford and Cambridge do. At Oxford and Cambridge, you sit in a room with your tutor for an hour every week, and they drill you. You've done the readings during the week. They drill you, and at the end of the hour, the tutor makes a couple of notes as to whether you did a good job or not, and that's it. And you do that every week till the end of semester. Now, there's one problem with that. That's a remarkably uneconomic idea. I teach 500 students at a go. Many of you do the same. The idea that we go to our deans and say, could I have 499 other colleagues to help me with this course, doesn't seem like it would work. So the idea, though, I think the moment for AI in education, we've been working hard on this, I want to distill it. The idea, one big idea I want to leave you with, is it offers us the opportunity for personalization at scale. What do I mean by that? Well, if we had 499 colleagues, this is what teaching would look like. It would be 500 students mixed with 500 professors, and they'd be learning a lot, and the wage bill would be enormous. But we can take a slightly different approach and give each of those students a personalized set of AI tools that they can work with. So now we have exactly the scale that we wanted, the personalization that we wanted, but we can do it remarkably cheaply. So it's time to go to your dean and say, I just saved you the wage bill of 499 new faculty. So that's the big idea. I gotten that far, right? This is a talk with one big idea, personalization at scale. What I want to do is give some substance to that. And so I've got 4 tentative ideas or applications that work on that. The first is a Socratic tutor. The second is a practice exam coach. Third, a teaching collaborator. And fourth, a text aggregator. I'm going to go through these crazy ideas in turn. So I'm going to start with the Socratic tutor. I want to start by explaining the problem with AI. The problem is if I set a problem set and my students go and use ChatGPT, the only skills they'll use are Control-C and Control-V, And that's the end of the problem set, right? And so what I want to, and then they learn nothing. But can we use AI in a way that they'll actually learn something? And so here there's a very interesting and I think quite important study that comes out of Turkish math high school education. And it was only published a few weeks ago. But in this study, what they did, a randomized control trial, in this high school, they had math the same way you and I would give out problem sets. One group was told, use your normal pre-GPT tools, pencil and paper, calculator if you like. Another group was given access to ChatGPT. You can guess, I'm going to give the spoiler here, that group did a lot of Control-C, Control-V. The third group was given access to what they called a GPT tutor. What this did is it never answered the question. You could say, what happens when the Florida orange crop is rained out? And it will say, do you think it changed supply or demand? Right? So there's no Control-C, Control-V here. It doesn't work. So what are the results of this experiment? And it's a real experiment. So on the actual problem set, that's what the first column shows you. People who were using regular ChatGPT did substantially better than people who weren't. People who were using the GPT tutor did even better. The reason for this, of course, in a math class is GPT makes a lot of mathematical errors. The best way to prompt GPT actually is through a series of questions. And so by engaging with the chatbot, you're actually leading the chatbot more often to the right answer as it was leading you to the right answer. But the really important result here is the final column because it's actually something about what students learned. We go to the end of semester and we give them all an exam. The kids who did all their problem sets using regular ChatGPT did substantially and statistically significantly worse. So we don't want them doing that. Now you'll notice that people using the GPT tutor didn't do better, but I want to defend this and say, yeah, but they didn't do worse. And that's kind of the point. What we want to do is outcompete so that if we put a GPT tutor into a problem set, students are going to find that easier, more engaging, more useful than going off to the OpenAI website. And if they do that, they'll sustain their learning. And so that is what leads us to, and this is what Macmillan has now implemented, a Socratic tutor, right? This Socratic tutor, it asks you questions. It will provide guidance and it will never provide answers. Now, I'm going to show you just a couple of things on this. But before I do that, I want to remind you of the opportunity cost principle. When you look at AI, don't say, is it perfect? Say, is it as good as my teaching assistants? Because that's the relevant comparison that each of us faces. AI is profoundly imperfect, but so are all the people we work with. And my promise to you is maybe we can develop tools that are less imperfect than those we're currently using. So let's have a look. Let's see if I can find it here. Here is the tutor. So here I'm in an achieved problem set. This is actually my class from Econ 101 right now. We're doing labor economics. And it says, you can see the question now, right? So I can come to the tutor and I can say, oh, I didn't really understand the question. Could you rephrase it for me? And I'm like, well, I don't really understand what labor supply is. Explain what labor supply is. And now it's asking me a question. What happens to the supply of labor in the fast food industry if workers find better opportunities in a similar industry like retail? I don't know. Maybe they'll go there. Yeah, so what has that got to do with it? And if I thought about my very best graduate students in a one-on-one tutoring session with my undergraduates, they'd be giving exactly these responses, almost word for word. I just want to show you something. Right. And we've got a bunch of engineers who've made that completely bulletproof. Right? So again, it's not perfect, but it literally looks like a Michigan graduate student sitting down one for one saying, hey, let's work through this together. What do you think's going on with supply? What do you think's going on with demand? I urge you to play with it. It's amazing. So one thing we do to eliminate that reflex to always go to the tutor is you have to put skin in the game, which is you have to answer a question first in order for it to help you. Only then can you help. You'll notice it only ever responds with questions. It never gives the answer. You'll notice how good it was. It really understood the question. It understood economics remarkably well. That's because it's trained on our teaching materials. And so it'll use our language and it'll reflect the precise question that we've put together for you there. And I want to show you what I think is actually just the absolute killer app here. What if English is my second language? All of a sudden, everything goes into Spanish. What if there? So now it's telling me everything in French instead, right? So multilingual tutors come for free. That, I think, is kind of astonishing. And I want to tell you why you should care about that. I did what anyone would do in a moment like this. I downloaded the census. Actually, it's the American Community Survey, which has a question about which language is spoken at home. And this shows you that among economics majors, right? So that's probably actually a more English-speaking group than principal students. But it shows very, very high rates of people from a non-English speaking background. And if you look at this, you might think this is a California or Texas issue, but if you think is 1 in 10 of my students coming from a non-English speaking background, it's actually pretty much an everywhere problem. Not problem, issue or opportunity that we can better serve those students. Now, some might say, well, the answer here is pretty simple. What we need to do is also write our questions out in Spanish. But actually, it turns out that the languages that people use are remarkably diffuse. So Spanish is a quarter of the non-English speaking people. Then we go Chinese, Hindi, Russian, Korean, French, Tagalog, Dravidian, Japanese. Guess what? That tutor I just showed you speaks every single one of these languages. So those students will be able to engage with it in their own language. Idea 2. I literally came up with it this week. My students are coming up to their first midterm. And they're saying to me the same thing I'm sure yours are saying to you, could I have some practice problems? So I thought, well, wouldn't it be good if I could give them a lot of practice problems and also some help and some feedback? And if I were going to be a good econ instructor, I wouldn't have my personality. I'd have Ted Lasso's. And so what I've decided to do is blend Ted Lasso's sunny disposition with some knowledge of economics. And so I asked OpenAI what that would look like. And let me now show you this fellow who I call Coach Wolfers, right? So Coach Wolfers has been trained on I've trained Coach Wolfers on all my past midterms. Because each of us, when we set our midterms, we have our own flavour, what it is we want our students to learn. Some of us love multiple choice, some love short answer, some love essays, right? So all my testing has my flavour, so I wanted to expose students to the sort of questions I'm going to show them. So I've trained it on that, and I've trained it on the syllabus, and I've trained it on all my PowerPoints, right? So I could now say, I don't know, I'm new to this. Tell me what you can do, coach. So now coach is going to make up some questions that resemble ones from past exams in form, level, type, and so on. I'm going to try and give an answer here. I don't know I haven't even read the question. And he's kind of nice to me. We just did welfare economics. It's before the midterm. So now he's going to give me a little bit of a lesson on this stuff. And then I could ask him for some more multiple choice questions that look like the ones from past exams. So this is just a little widget. I had to roll it out to my students this week. But it gives you a sense of what the opportunities are. And what I want you to do is not think about my example. My example is a weird mishmash. Like I asked Betsy today, what would you do? And she would have Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is a strong woman. Taylor Swift is a brilliant businesswoman. And she's a great role model for young women. But you could do any of this yourself fairly easily. Adopting whatever sunny disposition you want. That's kind of just the fun part. The real meat and potatoes is my students can sit in their dorm rooms and do infinite quizzing on the right materials the right way and receive feedback on it until the midterm. Okay, idea number 3. What if we now think about AI as our teaching collaborator? So one thing you might do, you might jump across to ChatGPT and say, please think up some active learning activities for my class on externalities. Right? Each of us wants to be that special teacher who has all the cool ideas and activities, and maybe you read the Journal of Economic Education or scour the web in order to find just the right activity. And it's really hard to do, and I've been teaching a long time and I've got a few of them, but I wish I had more of them. So you could put this prompt. The problem with this, and this is just a brief aside on prompt engineering, we economists know that this won't work, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. And when you work with generative AI, I want you to understand this. You have to work hard to make it work well. And if you walk in and do something simple, brief, and easy, and it disappoints you, you're the problem, not it. Many people do something simple, brief, and easy, find it's not great, and then walk away from it. But our students aren't like that. Our students are racing ahead of us. They're on top of it all. So, you couldn't answer this question without some more context. So why do you think ChatGPT could? So what I need is a prompt that has some context. Who are my students? Who is the instructor? What's being taught? I need instructions. What sort of activities are we talking about? How much class time's available? I need a very precise task. What is it you want from me? And here's one that I think is really valuable. You always want a prompt that gives the AI an opportunity to ask you questions for the parts of the prompt you've missed out. And so now it will ask you for the stuff that you want. So here's my prompt. It's really long. Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you to memorize it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to regular ChatGPT. And I've just copy and pasted that prompt in. But here's the magic. That prompt says, here are my slides. Can you find an activity that fits in with my slides? Right here, I've got the slides from the Stevenson-Wolfers textbook that Morgan Taylor put together. They're amazing. Morgan's there. I love Morgan's slides. They're incredible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, try and find ChatGPT, and I'm going to just upload them, right? So now ChatGPT knows what I'm going to teach next Friday. And I'm just going to say, can I have some active learning exercises to go with this? Doesn't always work well. This is a live demo. We'll see what happens. Okay, so number 1, kind of just an eye-clicker poll. It's fine, but it's not particularly ingenious. I really like number 4. Number 4 feels like it's shaping up to be pretty good, doesn't it? It's like a real activity where they run a market and you see what happens. So let's go with that. I don't mind about my typos because it also is fine with that. It's even fine with my accent. It's crazy. You'll notice my prompts are not cheap and easy, right? I'm really going in depth. I'm going in depth the same way I would if I were talking to a graduate student. Okay. So now I'm just going to ask it for slides. Now, I want to warn you, its slides are kind of ugly. But the slides come for free. And so what I can do is I can import the slides into my theme, add a little bit more color and flavor, and I'll be ready to go. So I don't want you to think about this as being finished product at all, but what it is a 3/4 done product that just took us 3.5 minutes, right? The important thing about this exercise, what I've just shown you here, there's nothing proprietary. You can all do this at home tonight, right? It's just about getting the prompts right and remembering that you can actually upload your materials, it will understand your materials and so on. Let's just get back to something more interesting. And so the other thing is it's going to throw out 5 ideas, but they're not all good. So what you want to do is discard, it's the same way I work with teaching assistants, discard 4 of them, or discard 3 of them, find the 1 or 2 that work, and then really work with it. Tell it what you want. I want this to be done on stage with 3 people. I want people to do it in pairs from their seats, and so on like that. And you'll end up with something, again, imperfect, but then you just add your spark to it and the thing's going to be beautiful. So far, let me ask you a question. What have we learned? What are the one or two of the most important insights you've learned in this session? And what are some concrete ways in which you might change your teaching? You can still finish putting in your answers now. I want to point out the difficulty I face right now. I'm up here teaching. Well, I'm not. I'm giving a talk. But I'm up here teaching, and I just got like 30 or 40 or 50 responses. And what I need to do to make sense of them is I'm going to have to read them all, make sense of them, summarize them, and distill the key themes from all of them in order to make sense of any of it. Well, that's going to take me some time. I'll probably have to go back to my office and print them out. Then I might put them in different piles so I can keep track of the right themes involved. So I'll get back to you with the main themes shortly. Or I'll realize that you just gave me a data set. The data set was unstructured text. And what's really new about large language models is that they can make sense of unstructured text. So now what I have is effectively a spreadsheet with, 40 or 50 lines in it with your words in it. And what I can effectively do on the back end now is collect those 67 answers and tell ChatGPT 4.0 that I would like to know what the main ideas are and who told me that was a theme that they really wanted, that they really got from the talk so far. So I've managed to summarize unstructured text in just a couple of seconds. This was previously either incredibly time-consuming or impossible. And it's incredibly useful for me right now, which is I can decide where I want to go next in this talk. Or you could decide where to go next in your class. So how is this useful for you? We just talked about what the big ideas are. The broader idea is that we can use AI to summarize unstructured text. That provides all sorts of opportunities I think I hadn't thought of before. So here's my list of things we could do with it. And I want to say for those of us in large classes, unstructured text is a huge problem, right? We can barely read our teaching evals at the end of semester. It takes all day. But we really want to know what our students are thinking, so how do we get that? Well, for large classes, you can ask the computer to do it. So I could do what I just did at the end of class. I could say, well, what did we learn? And then the key takeaways come up on screen. Or I could do it as a conversation starter, because remember, I know what each person said, or I know some of the people who made various points. A lot of people like to end class by saying, hey, what's the muddiest point? What are you confused by right now? And then once I figure out what that is, I can go back and I can remedy it. I can reteach whatever material people are struggling with. I could have rapid response class feedback. I could just say, hey, tell me how class is going so far. And I don't have to go through the evaluation forms, which are a 1 to 5 scale, which manage to smush all meaning and bring it down to a single metric that's very hard to make sense of. Instead, I'm going to get rich textured feedback in just a minute. And here's how I'm going to use it. I'm giving a talk, I'm giving a lecture. I cancelled one of my 101 classes a few days before the election. And I just said, because I said to the students, there's so much economics that we can talk about, and I'm sure you're so interested in economics right now. I'm going to spend a whole class talking about the economic issues that came up in the election. Now, the problem is if you start me talking about the economic issues that come up in an election, I'll still be here next Thursday. So I'm going to just ask them, what are the issues you want to talk about? And we'll see, do tariffs come up? Do taxes come up? Does childcare come up? And then I'll use that to structure the rest of my talk. And again, that would be very hard to do with a very formal structured poll, but here we're making sense of unstructured data. Okay, so this is a talk that really is about one idea. The idea is we can, and at some point will need to, adapt our teaching for the AI world. I've talked in the past, and Jonathan's going to talk about some of the threats that it poses, but I think it poses tremendous opportunities. And I've just shown you 4 ideas that are things I'm working on, right? One of them you can already use right now and achieve. That's what the Socratic tutor is. I think we call it an AI tutor. The practice exam coach, I'm going to try and roll that out with my students, and I'll report back on how that goes. The teaching collaborator, you can go home and do that this evening, right? You can do it right now because it just requires you to upload your teaching materials and use a prompt, and I've shown you a useful prompt. I'm happy to send that to anyone who didn't get a chance to take a photo as they went. And the text aggregator, that's a prototype and a proof of concept, but we'll see what we can do with that in the future. So I asked ChatGPT what I look like, and this is what it looks like. When I'm trying to think about ways that Betsy and I can harness the power of AI to help you become better instructors. And so I want to go back and conclude all of this with one more question. And I'm serious, I'd like you to get your phones out again right now, and you understand exactly why I'm asking this question. So the whole idea here is AI can be our friend. We can personalize at scale. I've given you 4 of the goofy ideas I came up with this week, but you might have other ideas, better ideas. So one, can you share that idea with me? Or alternatively, which of the ideas that I've talked about are you really excited by? Because I'm going to use your voice to go back and talk to our AI developers at Macmillan to try and develop more of this stuff to go with our textbook. Look, normally a talk ends with me telling you what the right answers are, but actually this is a talk that's actually completely about collective intelligence, and you've told me what's important here, and you've given me a lot to go on with. Betsy and I are at home coding up all sorts of silly things in JavaScript. I know that economists are not meant to do that. We're meant to believe in the division of labour. But you've given us a lot to think about, and I appreciate your time, so thank you.